Some films invite you into their world. Van Helsing grabs you by the collar, throws open the doors of a storm-covered castle, and dares you to survive until sunrise. This is a world where legends are not bedtime stories. They breathe in the shadows, they move behind locked doors. They watch from ruined towers while thunder rolls across the mountains. Vampires, werewolves, ancient curses, secret orders, and creatures stitched together by forbidden signs all exist in the same dark universe. And standing in the middle of it is one man who seems to know how to destroy every monster except the ones living inside his own past. Welcome back to the Film Box, where we do more than revisit movies. We step inside them. We examine the machinery beneath the spectacle, the choices beneath the action, and the emotions hiding behind the images that first caught our attention. Today we are opening Van Helsing, Stephen Sommers' 2004 Gothic action adventure. A film that takes some of the most famous monsters in cinema history, places them inside one enormous supernatural conflict, and turns the result into something loud, strange, ambitious, and impossible to mistake for anything else. For some people, Van Helsing is a wildly entertaining monster movie packed with memorable creatures, dramatic castles, explosive battles, and an unforgettable gothic atmosphere. For others, it is a film that tries to carry so many ideas at once that the story almost collapses beneath them. Both reactions make sense. This is not a quiet film. It does not gently introduce itself. It arrives with lightning, screaming machinery, collapsing buildings, spinning weapons, and characters who behave as though the fate of the entire world depends on what happens before the next sunrise. But beneath all that spectacle is a more interesting film than it first appears to be. Van Helsing is about a man without a clear identity being ordered to fight creatures who are defined entirely by what they have become. It is about memory, guilt, loyalty, family, faith, and the fear that destroying monsters may slowly turn someone into one. It is also about old legends being reshaped for a modern blockbuster audience, where horror becomes adventure and gothic tragedy becomes high-speed action. That combination is exactly why this film still creates such strong reactions. You may remember the leather coat, the rapid-fire crossbow, the Transylvanian castles, or the enormous final confrontation. You may remember Hugh Jackman moving through the film like a supernatural gunslinger, or Kate Beckinsale fighting through danger with a sword in one hand and generations of family responsibility on her shoulders. You may remember Dracula's theatrical presence, Frankenstein's monster searching for dignity, or the werewolf staring through the darkness with frightening speed. But memory often simplifies a movie. When you return to Van Helsing, you begin noticing how unusual it really is. It is not simply adapting Dracula. It is not simply borrowing Frankenstein. It is not simply using the Wolfman as another villain. It is attempting to build a shared mythology around characters who originally belonged to separate stories, separate eras, and separate types of horror. That is a massive creative gamble. Sometimes it works beautifully. Sometimes the machinery becomes visible. Sometimes the film moves with thrilling confidence. Sometimes it rushes past emotional moments before they have time to breathe. And even when it stumbles, it keeps reaching for something bigger. It wants to feel like a lost chapter from an enormous book of monsters, secret histories, ancient bloodlines, and battles hidden from ordinary human eyes. And that ambition matters, because Van Helsing arrived at a moment when blockbuster cinema was searching for new ways to revive classic characters. The film looked backward toward Universal's monster legacy while moving forward with early 2000s visual effects, fast editing, fantasy action, and franchise-size world building. It wanted to make old horror icons exciting for a generation raised on comic book heroes, video games, and large-scale adventure films. The result is a movie that feels both old-fashioned and aggressively modern. Its castles, villages, laboratories, graveyards, and masquerade halls belong to Gothic tradition. Its movement, humor, digital creatures, and relentless pacing belong to the era in which it was made. Those two sides are constantly fighting for control, and that tension gives the film much of its personality. Throughout this breakdown, we are going to look beyond the surface. We will explore how the movie was built, why its visual style remains so recognizable, and how its production choices shaped the experience. We will examine the performances, the action, the music, the creature design, and the world Stephen Sommers tried to create. We will talk honestly about what works, what feels underdeveloped, and why the film's reputation has changed as audiences have returned to it over the years. We will also look at the deeper questions hiding beneath the monsters. What does it mean to live without knowing who you were? What separates a hunter from the creatures he hunts? Why do so many characters in this story struggle against identities forced upon them? And why does the film repeatedly connect love with sacrifice, even when that sacrifice comes at a terrible cost? There is more going on here than silver bullets and exploding carriages. The spectacle may be what pulls you in, but the tragedy is what gives the story its weight. Almost every major character is trapped by something inherited, forgotten, cursed, or unfinished. Van Helsing is trapped by a past he cannot remember. Anna is trapped by a promise made by generations before her. Dracula is trapped by the consequences of a life that refuses to end. Frankenstein's monster is trapped inside a body the world fears before it understands him. Look closer, and the entire film becomes a story about people trying to escape what they have been told they must be. That is the box we are opening today. Not just a monster movie, not just a piece of early 2000s nostalgia, not just an action spectacle with gothic decoration. We are opening a film filled with ambition, contradiction, darkness, energy, and a surprising amount of sadness beneath its surface. Every film is a box. We open it together, and before we follow Van Helsing into the darkness, we need to understand the strange creative decision that makes this movie so fascinating. Instead of choosing one legendary monster, it chose almost all of them, and that choice creates the film's greatest strength and its greatest danger. Van Helsing does not ask whether one classic monster can carry a blockbuster. It asks what would happen if Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, werewolves, vampire brides, secret religious orders, and centuries of family tragedy were all connected by one hidden conflict. The answer is a movie that feels less like a single horror story and more like every nightmare in an old library escaping at the same time. Here is what makes that idea so gripping. The monsters are not simply waiting in different corners of the film for the hero to defeat them. Their stories depend on one another. Frankenstein's experiment becomes part of Dracula's plan. The werewolf curse becomes both a weapon and a possible weakness. Anna's family history is tied to the survival of an entire bloodline. Van Helsing's forgotten past appears to reach further into the darkness than even he understands. Everything is connected. That means every creature brings more than physical danger. Each one reveals another piece of a mystery that began long before Van Helsing arrived in Transylvania. He is not entering a random monster infested village. He is stepping into the final stage of a conflict that has already consumed generations. Picture the situation. A family has spent centuries trying to destroy Dracula. Almost everyone who accepted that responsibility is dead. The last surviving heir continues the fight, knowing that failure may condemn her entire family. A mysterious hunter is sent to help her, but he cannot remember the life that might explain why Dracula seems to recognize him. Somewhere in the mountains, a creature feared by humanity may be the only innocent being capable of stopping an even greater horror. That is not just an action setup. It is a gothic tragedy disguised as an adventure film. The movie constantly surrounds its characters with impossible choices. Saving one person may place thousands in danger. Destroying a monster may mean destroying someone who never chose to become one. Completing a family mission may demand the sacrifice of the last person left to carry the family name. And at the center of all this stands Van Helsing. He is introduced as a legendary hunter, but the film immediately complicates that image. He is effective, controlled, and frighteningly calm when facing supernatural threats. Yet he does not behave like a man who enjoys killing. He carries out his assignments because he has been told they are necessary, while quietly wondering whether the people giving those orders truly understand the difference between evil and misfortune. That question changes everything. Because in this world, not every monster is evil, and not every human institution is automatically right. Some creatures attack because they are cruel, others attack because they are cursed. Some hide because they fear humanity, others use human fear to build power. Van Helsing must judge them in seconds, often while they are trying to tear him apart. The film's most interesting tension is not whether he can kill monsters, it is whether he can recognize which monsters deserve to be killed. Look closer at Frankenstein's creature. The world sees his size, his scars, and the unnatural energy moving through his body. Dracula sees a tool. Van Helsing gradually sees a living being with fear, intelligence, and a desperate desire to survive. The creature becomes a test of the hero's humanity. Will Van Helsing follow an order without questioning it, or will he protect something everyone else has already condemned? This is the moment when the film's spectacle begins revealing its deeper purpose. The crossbow, silver weapons, dramatic transformations, and enormous castles are entertaining, but they are also distractions. Behind them sits a story about identity. Almost everyone is fighting against the name, a curse, a duty, or a reputation imposed upon them. Anna is not allowed to live as an ordinary person because her family's unfinished mission controls her future. Frankenstein's creature is treated as an abomination because of how he was created rather than who he chooses to be. The werewolves lose ownership of their own bodies. Van Helsing has no memory strong enough to tell him whether the identity others have built around him is true. Even Dracula, despite his cruelty, is driven by something painfully recognizable. He wants his bloodline to continue. He wants to defeat the natural limits placed upon him. He wants to create life where life refuses to exist. But his version of love has become possession. He does not protect life, he manufactures it. He does not accept death. He tries to overpower it. He does not see his children as individuals. He sees them as an extension of himself and proof that his will can defeat nature. That is what makes him dangerous. Dracula is not simply a creature who drinks blood and commands an army. He is someone who believes that wanting something badly enough gives him the right to use anyone necessary to obtain it. Now place that against Van Helsing, a man whose entire existence has been shaped by other people deciding what he should do. One controls others because he remembers too much and refuses to release the past. The other obeys because he remembers almost nothing and has no past to hold on to. Their confrontation is more personal than it first appears. The film hints that Dracula knows something about Van Helsing that the hunter himself does not know. Every encounter carries an uncomfortable feeling of recognition. Dracula does not react to him as though he is meeting an ordinary enemy. He reacts as though someone from an unfinished chapter has returned. And Van Helsing feels it too. He may not remember Dracula, but something inside him responds before his mind can explain why. That mystery follows him through the story. It turns every battle into another question. Who was he before he became the Vatican's weapon? Why was his memory taken from him? Why does his symbol seem connected to ancient forces? And what exactly happened between him and Dracula before the events of the film? The movie never gives every answer. That can be frustrating, but it also creates a strange power. Van Helsing feels like one adventure pulled from a much larger life. The missing history makes him seem almost legendary, as though the character has existed for centuries beyond the edges of the screen. This is why the film is difficult to forget. It may overwhelm you with action, creatures, jokes, and digital effects, but the central mystery remains simple and effective. The greatest monster hunter alive does not know who he truly is, while the most dangerous monster in the world may know the answer. And once Dracula realizes Van Helsing has returned, the hunt stops being an assignment, it becomes a reunion. But before that reunion could exist on screen, the filmmakers had to solve a much larger problem. How do you place several generations of famous monsters inside one movie without making the result feel like a costume parade? The first important fact is that Van Helsing did not begin as a careful attempt to launch a corporate universe. It began with Stephen Sommers' personal affection for the black and white monster films he watched while growing up. After the success of The Mummy and The Mummy Returns, Universal gave him access to the studio's classic creature library. Instead of selecting Dracula, Frankenstein, or the Wolfman for separate stories, Summers decided to make them parts of one adventure. Hugh Jackman's casting also placed the film at a specific moment in his career. He had already become internationally recognizable through the first two X-Men films, but when Helsing asked him to carry an original blockbuster identity without relying on Wolverine, his physical presence made the hunter believable, while his natural warmth prevented the character from becoming only a grim weapon. That balance matters in scenes where Van Helsing questions an order or protects a creature others consider disposable. The casting tells you that the production wanted an action hero, but it also wanted someone capable of revealing uncertainty beneath the coat, weapons, and carefully controlled silence. That origin explains the film's unusual energy. It feels less like a mythology assembled through meetings and more like someone opening an old box of monster figures and imagining how all their stories could collide. Dracula is no longer isolated inside his own legend. Frankenstein's discovery becomes essential to the vampire's plan. The werewolf is transformed from a separate horror icon into a weapon capable of changing the balance of the entire conflict. This also explains why the movie often chooses excitement over restraint. Summers was not approaching these creatures as sacred museum pieces that had to remain untouched. He was remembering how enormous and mysterious they felt to him as a child, then rebuilding that feeling with the tools of a modern action blockbuster. You can see that intention immediately in the second production choice. The opening was deliberately filmed in black and white. The prologue lasts 7 minutes and recreates the visual language of early Universal horror. Cinematographer Alan Davia photographs the castle laboratory, electrical machinery, and frightened villagers with deep shadows and flashes of white light. The editing is calmer and more classical than much of the film that follows. Even the familiar declaration that Frankenstein's experiment has succeeded is treated like an echo traveling out of an older era of cinema. This is not simply a decorative filter. The black and white sequence gives the monsters a cinematic ancestry. Before Van Helsing becomes a rapid adventure filled with moving cameras and digital creatures, the film reminds you where these legends came from. It begins inside the visual memory of classic horror and then breaks into color when the new version of the story takes control. That shift changes the way you see the Paris sequence. The fight with Mr. Hyde is intentionally exaggerated, fast, and almost comic book like. The film has moved from the controlled nightmare of old studio horror into the restless movement of a new century. In only a few minutes, the filmmaking announces its entire strategy: honor the past and accelerate it. The third fact is that much more of this world was physically constructed than the film's reputation for computer-generated imagery may suggest. The filmmakers built enormous environments and then extended them digitally. Dracula's castle included a massive exterior constructed in a parking area in Downey, California. Shipping containers were stacked to create the underlying scale, while carved, lightweight surfaces were used to imitate ancient stone. A large bridge section, chains, walls, and mechanical pieces were engineered so performers could occupy real space rather than reacting only to an empty screen. The Frankenstein laboratory was another complicated physical environment. It contained moving platforms, hanging chains, electrical devices, sparks, stonework, and machinery designed to rise and fall during the sequence. The set had to work as a believable scientific chamber, a Gothic cathedral, and an action location at the same time. That physical construction matters because the actors appear to be fighting the environment as much as the monsters. Hugh Jackman can run across real platforms. Richard Roxburgh can stand inside an actual chamber filled with moving components. Shula Hensley's creature can occupy a space that feels heavy, dirty, and dangerous. The digital extensions make the buildings impossibly large, but the practical foundations give them texture. The reason Dracula's world feels exaggerated without becoming completely weightless is that stone walls, floors, staircases, chains, doors, and laboratory equipment were often present around the performers. Look closer at the opening laboratory. The sparks may pull your eyes first, but the uneven architecture creates the discomfort. The room does not feel calmly designed, it feels assembled by obsession. Walls lean into one another. Machinery interrupts ancient stone. Science has invaded a place that already seems spiritually corrupted. The fourth major production fact is that the film used the Czech Republic to give its fantasy geography a believable European foundation. Production took place in 2003 with Prague providing locations such as Charles Bridge, Hrdnak Square, Old Town Square, St. Nicholas Cathedral, and streets near the historic center. Byrandov Studios was also used, while Permishtiren Castle supplied the kind of authentic architecture that cannot be completely reproduced through visual effects. Prague is especially valuable to the film because it can appear beautiful and threatening at the same time. Its towers, narrow streets, stone surfaces, and layered history already carry the atmosphere that Van Helsing needs. The production could then redress those spaces and use them to suggest Paris, Budapest, Rome, or Transylvania. This changes how you read the film's world. Although the geography is intentionally fantastical, many backgrounds contain real age. The streets do not look old only because someone painted cracks onto a studio wall. Certain buildings and public spaces have existed through generations of actual European history. That authenticity quietly supports the more impossible elements placed in front of them. It is one reason the film can show a carriage racing through a supernatural landscape without losing all contact with reality. The creatures may be digital, but the stone beneath them feels permanent. The fifth fact concerns the monsters themselves, particularly the werewolves. Summers described the creature process as deeply collaborative. His role was to communicate the image and emotion he imagined, while model makers, designers, special effects teams, and computer artists worked out how that imagination could move. The werewolf transformation became the clearest example of this approach. Instead of showing fur slowly growing across a human body, the film imagines the wolf as something trapped underneath the person's skin. The human layer tears away as the larger creature emerges. It is painful, violent, without becoming excessively graphic and instantly understandable. The victim is not dressing as a monster. Something inside him is replacing him. That decision serves the story because the curse becomes a physical battle over identity. When a character transforms, the human form is not gently altered, it is discarded. And when the change reverses, fragments of humanity appear to rebuild themselves. The effect makes every transformation feel temporary and terrifying, as though two bodies are competing for the same existence. One famous monster almost joined the film, but was removed before production was completed. Summers considered placing the creature from the Black Lagoon in the water surrounding Dracula's castle. Accounts differ slightly on whether the main reason was a possible standalone project or the additional cost, but both explanations point toward the same truth. Even a film this enormous had limits. The missing creature reveals something about the production's ambition. Van Helsing already contained more monsters than most franchises would introduce across several movies, yet the team was still imagining another one hiding in the moat. Finally, the scale of the gamble can be seen in the numbers. The reported production budget was around $160 million, making this an extremely expensive release for 2004. It ultimately earned roughly $300 million worldwide. That is substantial business, but not enough to make a sequel feel inevitable once marketing and distribution costs entered the picture. The financial scale is visible in almost every frame. Large sets, international location work, extensive creature animation, period costumes, stunt teams, and complicated action sequences were not supporting a small gothic drama. Universal was treating its monster history as the foundation for a major global adventure, and that knowledge changes the way you see the finished film. Every crowded frame becomes evidence of a studio and a director trying to prove that classic horror icons could stand beside the largest action franchises of their era. The film's excess was not an accident added after the story was finished. Excess was the plan. To understand whether that plan truly works, we now have to open the box properly and examine what kind of movie Van Helsing is trying to be. Released in 2004 and directed by Steven Sommers, Van Helsing is a gothic action adventure that pulls together Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, werewolves, vampire brides, and several generations of monster movie history inside one enormous supernatural chase. Hugh Jackman leads the film as Gabriel Van Helsing, a mysterious hunter working for a secret order connected to the Vatican. Kate Beckinsale plays Anna Valerious, the last active defender of a family that has spent centuries trying to destroy Dracula. Richard Roxburgh takes on the role of Count Dracula, while David Wenham brings warmth and nervous humor as Karl, the inventive friar assigned to assist Van Helsing. Schuler Hensley plays Frankenstein's creature, and Will Kemp appears as Vulcan, Anna's brother, whose fate makes the family conflict even more personal. On paper, the film looks like a horror crossover. In practice, it behaves more like an adventure serial, a comic book movie, and a supernatural roller coaster wearing the clothing of classic gothic horror. It contains graveyards, castles, laboratories, curses, and creatures from the darkness, but it rarely tries to frighten you through silence or restraint. Its preferred weapons are speed, scale, movement, and spectacle. That distinction matters. Someone expecting a slow Dracula story built around seduction, dread, and psychological tension may find Van Helsing overwhelming. Someone expecting a pure adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein may be frustrated by how freely the film reshapes that material. Summers is not attempting to preserve each original story in isolation. He is taking familiar pieces, connecting them, and building a new mythology designed for blockbuster entertainment. The title itself signals that decision. This is not called Dracula, Frankenstein, or the Wolf Man. It is named after the hunter moving between their worlds. Van Helsing becomes a thread capable of connecting legends that were never originally designed to share one continuous plot. The name Gabriel is also important. In Bram Stoker's novel, the vampire hunter is Abraham Van Helsing, an older professor whose knowledge and moral authority helped guide the fight against Dracula. This film reinvents that figure as a younger, physically powerful operative with missing memories and a mysterious relationship to the forces he has been ordered to destroy. He carries the familiar surname, but he is not simply the same character placed inside an action film. He feels closer to a supernatural gunslinger. He travels from assignment to assignment, arrives in places already damaged by fear, eliminates threats, and disappears before ordinary people can understand what happened. His weapons combine 19th century design with impossible invention. His coat, hat, and guarded personality create the image of someone who has spent so long hunting darkness that he no longer knows what a normal life would look like. The film exists because Summers saw a way to turn Universal's monster heritage into one connected adventure. Instead of treating the creatures only as historical icons, he imagined them as active forces within the same hidden world. Frankenstein's experiment could become the missing element in Dracula's plan. A werewolf could become more than a victim of a curse. The Valerious family could connect centuries of resistance to one final mission. This approach gives the movie the feeling of an alternate history. Ordinary people live in the 19th century, but beneath their world exists a network of secret doors, hidden laboratories, ancient contracts, supernatural bloodlines, and religious organizations prepared for threats most citizens will never see. Technology is advancing, but so is humanity's ability to disturb forces it does not understand. At its heart, this is a rescue story wrapped inside a monster hunt. Van Helsing is sent to help Anna defeat Dracula, but physical victory is only one part of the mission. Anna's family has been denied peace because Dracula remains alive. Her ancestors have died without completing their sacred promise, leaving her to carry the responsibility alone. Saving her home therefore means more than protecting a village. It means releasing generations of her family from a spiritual debt. The problem is that Anna has been raised to believe her own survival is less important than completing that mission. That gives the film an emotional conflict beneath the action. Van Helsing is ordered to protect someone who has already accepted that she may need to die. Anna is forced to trust a stranger, connected to an institution she does not fully respect. Both characters have spent years treating themselves like instruments rather than people. Their relationship works best when the film allows those similarities to surface. They challenge each other because they recognize the same stubborn isolation in one another. Anna sees a man who hides behind duty. Van Helsing sees a woman carrying a responsibility that should never have belonged to one person. Neither of them is comfortable admitting fear, grief, or dependence, so they communicate through arguments, dangerous decisions, and acts of protection. This is also why Frankenstein's creature becomes so important. He is not merely another monster added to the collection, he represents the moral center of the film. He was created through unnatural means, but he possesses compassion, intelligence, and a desire to live. Dracula was once human, yet he has surrendered almost every trace of empathy. The film repeatedly asks you to judge characters by their choices rather than their appearance or origin. That idea gives the story more weight than its loudest sequences might suggest. My spoiler free verdict is that Van Helsing is deeply flawed but undeniably distinctive. Its pacing is often too fast. Some emotional developments receive less time than they deserve. The visual effects vary in quality, and the film occasionally adds another complication before fully resolving the previous one, yet its personality is difficult to resist. The production design is imaginative. Alan Silvestri's music gives the adventure enormous momentum. Hugh Jackman and Kate Beckinsale commit completely to the heightened world around them. Richard Roxburgh performs Dracula with extravagant theatricality, treating every entrance as though the castle itself has become a stage. Most importantly, the movie believes in its own impossible universe. It never apologizes for being excessive. It does not pause to laugh at the monsters or reassure you that the filmmakers consider themselves above the material. Even the humor exists inside the adventure rather than outside it. This film is for you if you enjoy gothic imagery, fast supernatural action, monster crossovers, dramatic villains, large scale fantasy, and films that value imagination over realism. It is especially worth revisiting if you grew up with early 2000s blockbusters and want to experience a time when studios were willing to spend enormous resources on strange, highly specific visions. It may not connect with you if you prefer restrained horror, faithful literary adaptation, subtle villains, or carefully realistic action. Van Helsing operates through heightened emotion and constant movement. You must accept its world before it can carry you through it. And the best way to understand that world is not by asking whether it is realistic. The better question is whether it creates a feeling strong enough to make reality temporarily irrelevant. For me, that answer begins in the film's opening minutes. When expectation gives way to atmosphere and the entire adventure announces exactly how wild it intends to become. I walked into Van Helsing expecting a straightforward monster hunt, but the film gave me something closer to a gothic theme park running at full speed. The first few minutes tell you almost everything you need to know about the experience ahead. There is thunder, machinery, frightened villagers, a towering castle, a desperate scientist, and a creature being pulled into life through forces no one fully understands. The black and white photography makes the opening feel like a lost fragment from another era, but the scale already belongs to a modern blockbuster. It is familiar and exaggerated at the same time. That combination immediately caught my attention. The film is clearly borrowing the language of classic horror, yet it is not trying to imitate those movies perfectly. It takes the shadows, laboratories, windmills, angry crowds, and tragic monsters, then increases the volume until everything feels larger than memory. The opening does not ask you to slowly discover its world, it throws you inside. Before you have time to settle into the laboratory, the story is already moving through fire, panic, and destruction. Frankenstein's creature is burning to violence. His creator has barely completed the experiment before the world begins collapsing around them. Dracula arrives not as a distant presence waiting in a castle, but as an active force already shaping the tragedy. That immediacy creates a strange first impression. The film feels like you have entered the final chapter of a story that began long before you arrived. Characters know secrets you do not. Old enemies recognize one another. Promises have already been made. Entire families have spent generations preparing for conflicts that the film introduces in seconds instead of beginning the mystery that feeling made the world seem larger. Then the movie cuts to Paris and reveals Gabriel Van Helsing through an entirely different type of sequence. He is not introduced in Transylvania, surrounded by the creatures most closely connected to his name. He is chasing Mr. Hyde through Notre Dame Cathedral. That choice tells you this is not going to be a traditional Dracula adaptation. Van Helsing is presented as someone whose work extends across countries, legends, and different kinds of supernatural threats. Mr. Hyde is almost a demonstration assignment. He allows the film to show the hunter's weapons, physical confidence, dry humor, and moral uncertainty before the central story begins. What hooked me was not simply the action. It was the contrast between Van Helsing's reputation and his behavior. The people around him describe him like a fiat killer. He is treated as someone who appears, destroys a threat, and leaves behind questions. Yet Hugh Jackman plays him with hesitation beneath the competence. He does not seem proud of the lives he takes. He is tired of being ordered to judge creatures whose histories he may not fully understand. That detail gave the character more humanity than I expected. A less interesting version of Van Helsing would enjoy every hunt and never question his purpose. This version is effective because he seems increasingly uncomfortable with how effective he has become. He knows exactly how to enter a dangerous place, locate a weakness, and survive an impossible fight, but he cannot explain who he was before this life began. The action therefore hides a quiet emptiness. That emptiness becomes more visible when he returns to Rome. The secret order beneath the Vatican expands the world again, revealing weapons, maps, ancient knowledge, and people working to protect humanity from dangers hidden beyond ordinary history. The location resembles a supernatural intelligence headquarters built beneath centuries of religious tradition. I remember being pulled in by the possibilities of that space. Every table, document, invention, and doorway suggests another mission. Carl's arrival adds humor, but he also makes the organization feel functional. Someone must design the weapons. Someone must translate the ancient texts. Someone must understand why a particular symbol, fragment, or curse matters. The headquarters makes Van Helsing feel like one operative inside a much larger war. Yet the film does not remain there long enough to answer every question. It gives you just enough information to create curiosity, then sends the characters toward Transylvania. This is where the atmosphere takes complete control. The journey introduces a world shaped by fear before Dracula physically appears. The landscape is cold and colorless. Mountains surround the villages like walls. Buildings seem worn down by years of grief. Doors close quickly. People gather in public spaces because isolation feels dangerous. Even the daylight seems temporary. The film's Transylvania does not feel like a place where darkness occasionally arrives. It feels like a place where darkness owns the land and allows daylight to visit for a few hours. That visual atmosphere hooked me more strongly than any single plot point. The wind moves constantly. Clouds cover the sky. The architecture rises sharply above the characters. Bridges, towers, rooftops, and mountain paths create the impression that danger can come from every direction. The village does not offer safety because its streets are too open, while the surrounding buildings create hiding places for creatures capable of attacking from above. When the vampire brides descend on the town, the film fully reveals its rhythm. The sequence is chaotic, but it is not random. It introduces Anna through action, proves that the villagers live under constant threat, and shows how difficult these creatures are to kill. Van Helsing arrives with knowledge and specialized weapons, but even he cannot control every part of the attack. What made the sequence memorable was the movement. The brides sweep through the air with unnatural speed. People scatter below them. Anna moves across rooftops and ropes as if she has repeated this battle throughout her life. Van Helsing fires upward while trying to understand a situation that everyone else already considers normal. The entire village becomes a battlefield. There is very little time to process grief or destruction before the next threat arrives, and that becomes both the strength and weakness of the film. The pace makes the world exciting. It creates the feeling that the characters are always seconds away from disaster. But it also means emotional moments are often interrupted by movement. On a first watch, I did not question that rhythm very much. I was too interested in seeing what the film would introduce next. Every scene seemed to open another door. A family castle led to a hidden history. A ruined windmill led to Frankenstein's creature. A carriage journey became an aerial attack. A masquerade became a trap filled with the undead. The movie keeps promising that the next room will contain something even stranger. That constant escalation made it difficult to look away. Within the first 10 minutes, I was already invested in the central visual idea, one world where all these legends could exist together. Within the next 20, I wanted to understand why Dracula knew Van Helsing, why Anna's family could not rest, and why Frankenstein's creature might be more important than anyone realized. The film was not asking me to believe in subtle realism, it was asking me to believe in momentum. And once I accepted that, the exaggerated costumes, theatrical performances, enormous locations, and impossible weapons stopped feeling like distractions. They became parts of one consistent emotional language. Everything in Van Helsing is heightened because the characters are living at the end of centuries old conflicts. Nobody has time for ordinary conversation. Nobody enters a room without carrying a secret. Nobody loves without fear of loss. Nobody fights without generations of history standing behind them. That is what hooked me. Not perfection, not subtlety, not even the mystery by itself. It was the feeling that the film had built an entire supernatural world and could barely contain it inside 2 hours. And the more closely you examine how that world is photographed, edited, lit, and designed, the clearer its storytelling choices become. That world works because Van Helsing rarely treats the camera as a passive observer. It moves as if it is being chased by the same forces pursuing the characters. The cinematography constantly pushes forward, sweeps across large environments, drops from high angles, and follows action through spaces that seem too complicated to fully control. This movement creates the feeling that the world is larger than the frame. A tower continues above you. A bridge stretches beyond what you can see. A creature may enter from the sky, the ground, or a doorway hidden behind the characters. The camera rarely allows complete security. Even when Van Helsing and Anna pause to speak, the compositions often place architecture, open windows, dark corridors, or distant mountains around them. The background remains active. The film visually reminds you that danger does not disappear simply because the characters have stopped moving. This is especially effective in Transylvania. The landscape is frequently photographed with white frames that make human beings appear small against castles, cliffs, and storm filled skies. Anna may be an experienced fighter, and Van Helsing may carry specialized weapons, but the environment makes them look temporary. The stone structures seem older than their families. The mountains appear indifferent to whether they survive. That scale reinforces the central idea of inherited conflict. These characters are not beginning a new battle. They are entering a struggle that has existed longer than any individual life. The production design communicates that history before the script explains it. Cracked walls, damaged statues, worn staircases, and abandoned rooms suggest that the world has been losing this war slowly for generations. The color palette supports the same feeling. Transylvania is dominated by cold clays, faded blues, dirty browns, and pale stone. Warm colors appear, but they rarely feel comforting. Fire means destruction. Candlelight reveals rooms that remain surrounded by darkness. Golden interiors often belong to Dracula, where beauty is connected to temptation, artificial life, and danger. The film uses color less to create realism and more to separate emotional spaces. Rome contains brighter surfaces, organized interiors, and the warmth of human activity. It represents knowledge, preparation, and institutional control. Transylvania feels colder and less stable, as though the laws protecting ordinary life have weakened there. Dracula's environments move in the opposite direction. They are often rich, theatrical, and visually seductive, but that beauty feels preserved rather than alive. His castle resembles a place refusing to accept the passage of time. That is why the masquerade sequence looks so different from the village attacks. The village is exposed, grey, and desperate. The masquerade is filled with red, gold, movement, music, and elegant clothing. It appears safer because it is beautiful, but the beauty is a disguise. The lighting makes that deception possible. Faces glow beneath chandeliers while the edges of the room remain dark. The dancers move in organized patterns, creating the impression of celebration, but the shadows hide the truth about who is present. The scene uses visual abundance to create unease. There are too many smiling faces, too many synchronized movements, and too much perfection. Nothing living should appear that controlled. The camera movement inside the masquerade also changes the nature of the threat. During an ordinary battle, the danger is easy to identify. Creatures attack from outside, and the characters defend themselves. Inside the ballroom, Van Helsing and Anna are surrounded before they fully understand the situation. The camera glides through the crowd rather than fighting against it. That smoothness is important. It creates a temporary dreamlike quality, allowing the danger to remain hidden beneath elegance. When the illusion breaks, the visual rhythm changes with it. Movement becomes faster. The space becomes a trap. The beautiful crowd is revealed as part of the nightmare. Editing controls almost every emotional response in the film. Van Helsing uses rapid cuts during combat to maintain momentum and emphasize impact. Weapons are fired, creatures change direction, characters fall, and the environment reacts almost immediately. The editing rarely allows an action beat to become completely still. This creates excitement, but it also reveals one of the film's limitations. Because the cuts arrive so quickly, some movements lose physical clarity. You understand the direction of the battle, but not always the exact geography. A character may move from a rooftop to a window or from a carriage to a cable before the environment has fully registered in your mind. The film prioritizes emotional speed over spatial precision. When that choice works, the action feels breathless. The carriage sequence is a strong example. The editing moves between the horses, the road, the pursuing creatures, the people inside, and dangers appearing from above. Every cut adds a new problem. The sequence feels like a machine losing parts while continuing to accelerate. When the choice works less effectively, the action can feel weightless. The digital camera appears able to travel anywhere, and the creatures move so quickly that physical effort becomes difficult to measure. The danger remains visually impressive but sometimes less immediate. The strongest scenes balance digital movement with practical interaction. When Van Helsing swings from a cable, lands against a wall, or struggles with a physical object, the action gains weight. When Anna falls, grabs a rope, or strikes a surface, the body's contact with the set makes the danger easier to feel. This balance also shapes the creature effects. The monsters are designed around exaggerated silhouettes. Dracula's winged form spreads across the frame. The werewolves have oversized shoulders, long arms, and movement that combines human aggression with animal speed. Frankenstein's creature is built around heaviness. His body appears assembled rather than naturally grown, and every step suggests weight. Their movement reveals their identities. The vampire brides glide and dive. They are elegant even while attacking. Werewolves leap, tear, and crash through surfaces. They are forces of uncontrolled physical instinct. Frankenstein's creature moves more slowly because he is not presented as a predator. His size frightens people, but his movement often communicates caution. The sound design strengthens these differences. Metallic weapons snap and rotate with mechanical precision. Werewolves are surrounded by tearing, impact, and low animal sounds. Dracula's entrances often carry wind, voices, or musical tension that makes him feel connected to the atmosphere itself. Frankenstein's creature is accompanied by electricity, heavy steps, and the noise of machinery, linking his body to the process that created him. Then there is Alan Silvestri's score, which gives the film much of its emotional identity. The music does not remain quietly beneath the images. It pushes them. Strong percussion drives the hunts. Large orchestral themes turn movement into adventure. Choral elements add religious and mythological weight, while darker passages remind you that the excitement is built on tragedy. The score often supplies emotional continuity when the editing moves too quickly for a scene to develop naturally. It tells you when the film wants wonder, danger, sorrow, or triumph. This can feel obvious, but obviousness belongs to the movie's style. Van Helsing is not interested in hiding its emotions. It wants the music, camera, costumes, lighting, and performances to pull in the same direction. Even the framing reflects that boldness. Heroes are often placed against open skies, towers, flames, or enormous doors. Dracula frequently occupies elevated positions, giving him visual control before the physical battle begins. Anna is framed in motion, lightning swinging, running, or preparing to strike. Her identity is connected to resistance. Van Helsing is repeatedly shown standing between spaces. He appears in doorways, on bridges, near windows, and at the edge of light and darkness. The framing quietly reinforces his uncertain identity. He belongs to the human world, but he moves comfortably through the supernatural one. He serves a religious order, yet he questions its commands. He destroys monsters, but his forgotten past may connect him to them. The visual design keeps placing him at a boundary because that is where the character exists emotionally. Van Helsing may be loud, fast, and overloaded with digital spectacle, but its filmmaking is not without purpose. The cold palette creates a dying world. The moving camera makes danger feel constant. The architecture reduces human beings to temporary figures inside ancient conflicts. The creature movement reveals personality, and the music turns the entire film into a dark adventure rather than pure horror. Every technical choice points toward the same experience. You are not supposed to watch this world from a safe distance. You are supposed to feel as though the doors have closed behind you, the sun is disappearing, and something impossible has already begun moving through the sky. That danger begins long before Van Helsing reaches Transylvania. The story opens in the past, inside Victor Frankenstein's laboratory, where lightning, machinery, and forbidden ambition finally produce life. Frankenstein succeeds in awakening the creature he assembled, but the achievement immediately places him under Dracula's control. Dracula has supported the experiment because he believes the same force can solve a problem that even his supernatural power cannot overcome. His children are born dead. They exist in enormous numbers, suspended in cocoons and waiting for life that never comes. Dracula can create descendants, but he cannot make them truly live. Frankenstein's discovery may be the missing key. Victor refuses to surrender his creation. He understands too late that Dracula never cared about scientific progress. He only wanted a method. Their confrontation ends with Victor's death, leaving the creature frightened, confused, and trapped inside a world that already sees him as an abomination. As angry villagers approach the castle, the creature carries his creator's body into a windmill. The building is set on fire, and everyone assumes Frankenstein's experiment has been destroyed. But legends rarely disappear so easily in this film. A year later, Van Helsing is hunting Mr. Hyde through Paris. The mission establishes his reputation immediately. He is fast, resourceful, and willing to use any part of the environment as a weapon. Mr. Hyde is physically stronger, but Van Helsing understands how monsters move. He waits for openings, adapts under pressure, and survives by remaining calmer than the creature attacking him. The victory does not bring celebration. When Van Helsing returns to Rome, he learns that the public considers him a murderer. The secret order he serves knows the truth, but ordinary people only see the destruction left behind. This is the cost of his work. He protects a world that will never fully understand him. Cardinal Ginette gives him a new assignment. He must travel to Transylvania and help Anna Valerious destroy Count Dracula. Anna is the last surviving member of a family that has fought the vampire for centuries. Her ancestors cannot enter peace until Dracula is defeated, which means her mission carries both earthly and spiritual consequences. Van Helsing is not enthusiastic about becoming involved in another family curse, but the assignment contains a personal mystery. He is shown part of an ancient symbol connected to Dracula, and something about it seems tied to the past he cannot remember. Before he leaves, he is paired with Carl. Carl is a friar, scholar, inventor, and one of the film's most important sources of humanity. He is nervous, inexperienced in the field, and far less physically capable than Van Helsing. But he understands languages, symbols, history, and the specialized weapons created by the Order. Van Helsing knows how to survive a fight. Carl often knows what the fight means. Together they travel toward Transylvania, carrying equipment designed for creatures that ordinary weapons cannot stop. Meanwhile, Anna Valerius is already fighting to keep her family's mission alive. Her brother Velkan attempts to kill a werewolf terrorizing the region. The plan fails, and Velkan is bitten before disappearing into the darkness. Anna refuses to believe he is gone. Her refusal is emotional rather than logical. She has lost almost everyone connected to her family, and accepting Velkan's death would mean accepting that she is truly alone. That makes what happens next even more painful. Van Helsing and Karl arrive in the village, but they are not welcomed as rescuers. The villagers have seen outsiders come and fail before. They live under Dracula's shadow and understand that every public gathering can become an attack. That fear is justified almost immediately. Dracula's three brides descend on the village from the sky. Their human beauty gives way to monstrous forms as they attack with speed the villagers cannot match. Van Helsing responds using his rapid fire crossbow, while Anna fights with the instinct of someone who has faced these creatures repeatedly. The battle proves two things. First, Van Helsing's experience gives the village a level of protection it has not possessed before. He kills one of the brides, showing that Dracula's forces are not invincible. Second, Anna's resistance has made her reckless. She is brave, but her bravery is tied to the belief that completing the mission matters more than her life. Van Helsing sees that immediately. Anna, however, sees him as an intruder who does not understand her family. Their alliance begins through conflict because both are used to working alone. Soon after, Velkan returns. For a moment, Anna believes she has regained the last member of her family, but the werewolf curse has changed him. During the full moon, he transforms and attacks. Van Helsing tries to stop him without forgetting that the creature was once human, yet there is no safe way to contain the threat. Velkan dies during the confrontation. Anna loses her brother twice, first when he disappears, and again when she is forced to accept what the curse has made him. The loss hardens her determination to destroy Dracula, but it also deepens the loneliness driving her decisions. Van Helsing and Anna follow the evidence toward Castle Frankenstein. There they discover that the old experiment was never truly forgotten. Dracula is attempting to use electrical power and fragments of Frankenstein's work to awaken his dead offspring. The scale of the plan is horrifying. This is not about creating one child, it is about producing an entire generation of vampires capable of spreading beyond Transylvania. The first attempt briefly appears successful. Electricity moves through the machinery and the cocoons begin reacting. The young creatures awaken and pour into the night. For a few terrifying moments, Dracula appears to have defeated the limits of death. Then the offspring begin dying. The process remains incomplete. The machinery can create movement, but it cannot sustain real life. Dracula still lacks the essential element contained inside Frankenstein's creature. This reveals that the creature survived the burning windmill. He has spent the years since then hiding from the world, knowing Dracula will use him if he is found. When Helsing and Anna discover him, their first reaction is shaped by fear. His size, scars, and unnatural body make him appear dangerous. But he speaks with intelligence and emotion. He remembers his creator. He understands Dracula's purpose. He is frightened not because he wants to harm others, but because he knows what will happen if Dracula captures him. Van Helsing quickly recognizes the difference. The creature may have been made through unnatural science, but he is not evil. Protecting him becomes both a practical necessity and a moral decision. Hannah struggles with that conclusion at first. Her family has spent generations fighting monsters, so accepting that one of them deserves protection requires her to rethink the categories that have guided her entire life. Dracula does not give them time to debate. His force is attack, and the creature is nearly captured. Van Helsing, Anna, and Karl begin moving him away from Transylvania, hoping to place enough distance between him and Dracula's machinery. The plan leads to the carriage journey, one of the film's largest action sequences. The group appears to be transporting Frankenstein's creature inside a sealed carriage. Dracula's brides attack from the air, tearing at the vehicle while werewolves pursue across the ground. The horses race through narrow roads and dangerous terrain as Van Helsing fights from outside and Anna protects the mission from within. The sequence becomes a battle of deception. The attackers believe the creature is inside one carriage, but Van Helsing has prepared a trap. The vehicle falls from a cliff and explodes, apparently destroying both the creature and one of Dracula's brides. For a moment, the plan seems successful. Then Dracula's surviving forces discover that the real creature has been hidden elsewhere. The escape fails and the creature is taken. This changes the entire mission. Until now, Van Helsing and Anna have been trying to survive Dracula's attacks while searching for a way to defeat him. Now Dracula possesses exactly what he needs to awaken his offspring. Time becomes more important than preparation. The group must enter Dracula's world directly. A mysterious fragment held by Anna's family appears connected to a door that cannot be opened through ordinary means. Kara studies the symbols and discovers that the portal may lead to Dracula's hidden castle, a place that does not exist within normal geography. Before they can use it, Dracula draws Anna into another trap. She awakens inside an elaborate masquerade in Budapest. The room is filled with music, dancers, chandeliers, and luxurious costumes. Dracula presents the event like a romantic celebration, but the elegance hides a horrifying truth. Almost everyone in the ballroom is dead. Anna is surrounded by vampires who appear human until the illusion breaks. Dracula wants Van Helsing to come for her, knowing the hunter's growing attachment will make him predictable. Van Helsing and Karl infiltrate the gathering. The rescue becomes a struggle through a crowd that transforms from celebration into nightmare. Karl uses one of his inventions to produce a burst of light powerful enough to destroy the vampires filling the room, while Van Helsing escapes with Anna moments before the entire illusion collapses. The scene pushes their relationship forward. Until this point, much of their connection has been expressed through argument and mutual frustration. Now Anna understands that Van Helsing will risk the mission to save her, while he is forced to admit through action that she has become more than another person he was ordered to protect. Their relief does not last. Dracula's power continues growing, and the full moon approaches. Van Helsing is bitten by a werewolf during the struggle surrounding the castle. The curse will eventually transform him, giving him tremendous strength, but destroying his control over himself. Karl discovers that Dracula possesses a cure. The revelation creates a cruel balance. The werewolf is apparently the only creature capable of killing Dracula, but anyone using that power risks remaining a monster permanently. Van Helsing must allow the transformation to occur, defeat Dracula before the final stroke of midnight, and receive the cure before the curse becomes irreversible. Everything now depends on timing. The fragment belonging to Anna's family completes the doorway, opening a passage into Dracula's hidden castle. Van Helsing, Anna, and Karl enter knowing that several missions must succeed at once. Frankenstein's creature must be rescued before Dracula uses him. The vampire offspring must be destroyed. The cure must be found. And Dracula must finally die. They separate inside the castle. Karl and Anna search for the cure while Van Helsing moves toward Dracula. Frankenstein's creature is connected to the machinery as energy is drawn from his body. Lightning travels across the laboratory and the suspended offspring begin awakening again. This time the process works. The creatures tear free from their cocoons and fill the castle skies. Dracula has finally created the family he imagined, but their existence depends on the continued suffering of another living being. Frankenstein's creature pleads for help while Van Helsing confronts Dracula. The vampire recognizes him. Fragments of the hunter's forgotten identity surface through Dracula's words and reactions. Their history appears far older than Van Helsing's current life, but the immediate danger leaves no time to recover every answer. Then the moon takes control. Van Helsing transforms into a werewolf. The hunter becomes the kind of creature he has spent his life destroying. His weapons are replaced by claws and instinct. Dracula, confident against human enemies, suddenly faces the one supernatural force capable of ending him. Their battle tears through the castle. Dracula changes into his winged form, using flight, speed, and centuries of power. Van Helsing attacks with raw physical strength, but the werewolf curse also threatens his ability to recognize friend from enemy. Elsewhere, Anna and Karl secured the cure while trying to survive Dracula's final bride. The castle becomes a network of simultaneous struggles, each one depending on the other succeeding at exactly the right moment. When Helsing finally overpowers Dracula, the vampire who spent centuries resisting death is destroyed by a creature created through another curse. His death causes the newly awakened offspring to collapse, ending the army before it can escape into the world. But victory does not restore Van Helsing's humanity. Still trapped in werewolf form, he encounters Anna. She carries the cure and approaches him despite the danger. For one moment, the human part of Van Helsing appears to recognize her. But the creature's instinct takes control before she can safely reach him. Anna manages to inject a cure when Helsing returns to human form, but he is holding her lifeless body. The mission is complete. Dracula is gone. Anna's family is released from its ancient obligation. Yet the person who carried that responsibility through the final battle does not survive to experience freedom. Later, Van Helsing and Karl build a funeral pyre. As the flames rise, Van Helsing looks toward the sky and sees Anna's face appearing among the clouds, surrounded by the family members who can finally enter peace. Her expression is calm. The burden that defined her life is gone. Frankenstein's creature survives as well. He escapes alone on a small vessel, disappearing into the distance. The being everyone called a monster becomes one of the few characters granted a chance to choose his own future. Van Helsing watches him leave and does not interfere. That final choice matters. The hunter began the story as someone ordered to destroy supernatural creatures. He ends it understanding that identity is determined by compassion, not appearance. Dracula looked human and behaved monstrously. Frankenstein's creature looked monstrous and repeatedly showed humanity. Van Helsing has also crossed that boundary himself. The adventure closes with victory, but not comfort. A family is saved through its final loss. A monster finds freedom because a hunter chooses mercy. A hero completes his mission but leaves with more grief and no clear answer about who he was before the story began. The film has spent its entire running time throwing creatures, weapons, castles, and curses into motion. Yet, underneath all of it, the story ends with one painful truth. Defeating darkness does not guarantee that you will recover everything it took from you. And this is the moment the box opens completely. Once the box is fully open, the film's greatest strengths become easier to see. Van Helsing works best when it stops trying to behave like a traditional horror adaptation and completely embraces its identity as a gothic action adventure. It is not subtle, restrained, or especially faithful to the original literary versions of its monsters. But it is imaginative, energetic, visually committed, and filled with performers who understand exactly what kind of world they are inhabiting. The first major strength is Hugh Jackman. Van Helsing could easily have become a flat character. He wears dark clothing, carries specialized weapons, speaks in a controlled voice, and enters every situation with the confidence of someone who has survived hundreds of impossible encounters. On the surface, he has all the ingredients of a familiar action hero. Jackman gives him something more vulnerable. He plays Van Helsing as a man who has mastered danger but not himself. He knows how to identify weaknesses, respond to attacks, and make impossible decisions under pressure. Yet when the conversation turns toward his missing memories, his certainty disappears. One of the clearest examples comes when Dracula recognizes him. Van Helsing has spent the story entering rooms as the person with the most information. He understands creatures other people cannot defeat. He arrives carrying knowledge, weapons, and instructions. But in front of Dracula, that balance changes. Dracula knows something. Van Helsing does not. Jackman allows that realization to disturb the character without making him visibly collapse. His face tightens. His attention changes. While creatures transform and castles shake, Jackman keeps the character emotionally grounded. He rarely tries to compete with the visual effects by becoming louder than they are. Kate Beckinsale brings a different kind of intensity to Anna. Anna is written as a warrior carrying a family mission, but Beckinsale prevents her from feeling like someone who exists only to assist the hero. Her body language communicates constant readiness. She does not know how to stop fighting because fighting has become the only way she knows how to survive grief. That makes her relationship with Van Helsing more believable. They do not connect because the script suddenly tells them to fall in love. They connect because they recognize the same damage in one another. Both have been shaped by duty. Both hide fear behind competence. Both believe their usefulness may matter more than their happiness. Their quieter scenes are valuable because the film rarely slows down. When they speak without weapons in their hands, you can see the possibility of a different life neither of them truly expects to receive. Richard Roxburgh's Dracula is another major reason the film remains memorable. His performance is deliberately extravagant. He moves through scenes with the confidence of someone who considers ordinary human behavior beneath him. His voice rises and falls dramatically. His gestures are controlled but theatrical. He treats violence, romance, famine, and revenge as parts of one endless performance. For some people, the approach may be too much. But inside this film, it fits. A restrained Dracula would disappear beneath the machinery, flying creatures, werewolves, and enormous sets. Roxburgh understands that the villain must command the frame before he transforms into anything supernatural. His best scene is not necessarily the largest battle. It is the moment when he describes his children and the failure of their existence. For a brief time, the theatrical villain reveals something close to grief. He genuinely wants his offspring to live. But look closer, and the emotion remains corrupted. Dracula does not ask whether bringing them to life will harm the world. He does not care that Frankenstein's creature must suffer. His pain has become justification for cruelty. Roxburgh allows you to see both the wounded desire and the monstrous entitlement growing from it. Shula Hansley may deliver the film's most emotionally important performance as Frankenstein's creature. The makeup, scars, height, and mechanical details make him visually intimidating, but Hensley gives the character gentleness. His voice carries intelligence and sadness. He does not speak like a mindless experiment. He speaks like someone who has spent years understanding exactly why the world will never look at him without fear. The scene in which he explains Dracula's plan proves why the character matters. He is terrified, but he is not asking only for himself to be saved. He understands that his body could be used to awaken an army. His fear therefore carries moral awareness. He knows his capture would endanger people who might destroy him if given the chance. That contradiction gives the creature dignity. The story construction also works better than its crowded surface suggests. The film introduces many separate elements, but most of them eventually connect to the central conflict. Frankenstein's experiment is not included, only because the creature is famous. It becomes the source Dracula needs. The werewolf is not simply another enemy. The curse becomes the only way to defeat Dracula. Anna's family history is not background decoration. It gives the mission emotional and spiritual consequences. Even Carl's inventions are usually planted before they become essential. The fin operates like a large mechanical device. Individual parts may move too quickly, but the major pieces eventually lock together. Stephen Sommers' direction is strongest when he turns exposition into movement. Instead of pausing for long explanations about vampire brides, werewolves, secret doors, and ancient curses, he often reveals information through attacks, escapes, and discoveries. You learn how the creatures function while watching the characters try to survive them. This keeps the film alive. The village attack is an effective example. It introduces the vampire brides, demonstrates their speed, shows Anna's experience, proves Van Helsing's weapons are useful, and establishes the villagers' fear in one sequence. The Carriages does something similar on a larger scale. It combines action with deception, reveals the intelligence of both sides, and changes the mission by allowing Dracula to capture the creature. Visually, the film's greatest achievement is its world. The Transylvanian villages, frozen mountains, collapsing windmills, hidden castles, underground passages, laboratories, and masquerade halls all feel as though they belong to the same exaggerated universe. The design does not aim for historical purity, it aims for a feeling. That feeling is Gothic adventure. Doors are too large, towers are too high, storms are too violent, machines are too complicated, moonlight is too bright. Every location appears designed for a secret entrance, a dramatic confrontation, or a creature waiting beyond the frame. The production design matters because the plot moves so quickly. Even when you forget the exact explanation for a symbol or doorway, you remember the place where it happened. Alan Silvestri's music gives those places emotional force. The score is bold, rhythmic, and instantly recognizable. Percussion drives Van Helsing forward like a hunter who cannot stop moving. Choirs make the conflict feel ancient. Sweeping orchestral themes transform dangerous journeys into mythic adventures. The music is especially effective during transitions. When the characters move from Rome toward Transylvania, the score helps the film change scale. This is no longer one hunter completing another assignment. It feels like an expedition into a region where history, religion, and supernatural power have become impossible to separate. The sound design also deserves attention. Van Helsing's weapons do not sound ordinary. They click, rotate, release, and reload with mechanical precision. The rapid crossbow has its own rhythm, turning each attack into a combination of medieval imagery and imagined technology. Werewolf transformations sound painful, wings move with force. Electrical machinery fills laboratories with unstable energy. The film creates a world that never feels silent because silence would suggest safety. And then there is the masquerade. This may be the film's most unforgettable complete sequence. It combines production design, costume, music, camera movement, performance, and revelation in one location. Anna enters what appears to be a beautiful celebration, but every detail is slightly too perfect. The dancers move with unnatural elegance. Dracula behaves like a host controlling both the room and the story. When the truth is revealed, the entire environment changes meaning. The beauty was never protection, it was camouflage. That is what Van Helsing does brilliantly at its best. It takes the familiar and makes it dangerous again. A ballroom becomes a nest of the undead. A scientist's miracle becomes the foundation of an army. A monster becomes the most compassionate person in the story. A hunter becomes the creature capable of saving the world. The film does not achieve this perfectly in every scene, but when its performances, design, action, music, and mythology align, it creates something most polished blockbusters struggle to produce. It creates a personality entirely its own. But personality alone does not solve every problem. And Van Helsing often moves so aggressively that its strongest ideas are never given enough time to settle. The biggest weakness is pacing. The film contains enough mythology for several separate stories, yet it tries to introduce, connect, and resolve almost all of it within one adventure. Dracula, Frankenstein's creature, the werewolf curse, Anna's family history, Van Helsing's forgotten identity, the Vatican Order, the vampire offspring, and the portal to the hidden castle are all important. The problem is not that the story has too many ideas. The problem is that it really allows one idea to breathe before another arrives. A revelation is often followed immediately by an attack. A death is followed by a chase. A quiet conversation is interrupted by another piece of mythology. This keeps the film energetic, but it also reduces emotional impact. Berrigan's fate is a clear example. Anna loses her brother after fighting for years to protect what remains of her family. That should fundamentally change her. The film shows her pain, but it quickly pushes her toward the next objective. We understand that she is grieving, yet we are rarely allowed to sit with what that grief does to her. The same issue affects Frankenstein's creature. He may be the story's moral center, but his relationship with Van Helsing develops very quickly. Van Helsing recognizes his humanity, decides to protect him, and risks the mission for him. The choice makes sense, but a few more scenes between them could have made the bond far more powerful. Imagine a quieter exchange in which the creature questions Van Helsing about the lives he has taken. Both characters are judged by appearance and reputation. Both are used by institutions or creators. Both are searching for an identity beyond the purpose others assign to them. The film contains that connection, but it does not fully explore it. Van Helsing's missing past is another underdeveloped area. The mystery is introduced as though it will reveal something enormous. Dracula recognizes him. Ancient symbols appear connected to him. His first name carries religious implications, yet the story provides only fragments. Mr. Ali can be effective without complete explanation, but this one often feels less like deliberate ambiguity and more like material being saved for a sequel that never arrived. As a result, the final confrontation raises questions it cannot satisfy. Who exactly was Ben Helsing before losing his memory? How long has he existed? What happened between him and Dracula? Why does Dracula react to him with such personal anger? The film offers hints but not enough resolution. This weakens the emotional dimension of their battle. Physically, the conflict works. The werewolf has the power to kill Dracula, and the timing creates suspense. But emotionally, the fight could have carried far greater weight if their shared history had been clearer. The movie also struggles with tonal balance. Carl's humor is often welcome because the story needs relief from its constant darkness. David Wenham makes the character likable, and many of his reactions feel natural. However, some jokes arrive too close to moments of danger or grief. The film occasionally seems afraid that seriousness will slow the adventure. It introduces an emotional beat, then quickly adds humor or action before the moment can become uncomfortable. This protects the pacing, but it also prevents the darker material from reaching its full potential. Dracula's children are an example. The idea is disturbing and tragic. Thousands of lifeless offspring hang inside cocoons while Dracula searches for a way to awaken them. The image connects his desire for family with his refusal to respect natural limits. Yet the film treats the offspring mainly as a large visual threat. They become flying creatures to be destroyed rather than a deeper reflection of Dracula's obsession. More attention to what they represent could have made his plan emotionally horrifying rather than only spectacular. The visual effects are another mixed element. Some sequences remain imaginative and effective because the designs are strong. The werewolf transformations, Dracula's winged form, and the vampire brides all have memorable concepts. But the digital movement occasionally lacks weight. Creatures accelerate, turn, and crash with a freedom that makes them feel disconnected from the physical environments. When the action relies heavily on computer generated bodies, the danger becomes less immediate because the movement does not always obey believable force. This is especially noticeable during large aerial attacks. You understand what is happening, but you do not always feel the physical struggle. The speed becomes impressive rather than frightening. The action also suffers from unclear geography in certain moments. The editing moves rapidly between rooftops, ropes, carriages, windows, and collapsing structures. That creates momentum, but sometimes the viewer must work too hard to understand where characters are positioned. The best action allows you to anticipate danger. You know where the exit is, where the enemy is approaching from, and what obstacle must be crossed. Van Helsing occasionally cuts so quickly that the sequence becomes a collection of impacts rather than a clearly developing problem. Anna is another character who deserves more development outside the mission. We understand her responsibility, courage, grief, and determination. But we know little about who she would choose to be if Dracula did not exist. That missing dimension matters because her entire arc is about freedom from inherited duty. The ending asks us to feel the tragedy of her losing the future she fought to earn, yet the film rarely shows us what she wanted that future to contain. Her connection with Van Helsing helps provide an answer, but the romance develops too quickly. Their chemistry is believable and their similarities create a natural bond, but the story compresses the emotional progression into a small number of conversations between action sequences. Their final tragedy works because Jackman and Beckinsale commit to it. The script could have made it devastating. The ending itself is visually emotional but also slightly uncertain in tone. Anna, appearing in the clouds with her family, provides closure. Yet the image is so direct that it removes some of the complexity from Van Helsing's grief. A quieter ending might have allowed the loss to remain more personal. None of these flaws destroys the experience. The film's energy, world building, music, and atmosphere still carry it forward. But they prevent Van Helsing from becoming the richer gothic epic hiding beneath its blockbuster surface. The movie has powerful ideas about identity, faith, family, and monstrosity. It simply runs past too many of them before they can leave their deepest mark. To understand why Van Helsing feels so distinctive, place it beside the other gothic and supernatural adventures surrounding it. The most obvious comparison is The Mummy from 1999, also directed by Stephen Sommers. Both films revive classic Universal monsters through fast action, comedy, romance, elaborate production design, and modern visual effects. Both follow capable heroes entering ancient conflicts whose rules must be understood before the central creature can be defeated. But the mummy is more controlled. Its story is built around one main supernatural threat, giving Imhotep space to develop as both a monster and a tragic figure. The supporting characters contribute humor without making the mythology feel overcrowded. The romance between Rick and Evelyn also receives more time to grow through shared danger. Van Helsing attempts something much larger. Instead of opening one ancient tomb, it opens an entire library of legends. Dracula, Frankenstein's creature, werewolves, and vampire brides must all occupy the same narrative. That ambition gives Van Helsing greater variety, but it also makes the emotional storytelling less focused. The Mummy feels like a complete adventure designed around a strong central relationship. Van Helsing feels like the first chapter of a universe that was never allowed to continue. If you love Van Helsing because of his energetic tone, elaborate creatures, and combination of horror imagery with adventure, The Mummy is the most natural film to watch next. It offers many of the same pleasures with cleaner pacing and stronger character development. The second comparison is Underworld, released 1 year before Van Helsing. Both films imagine secret supernatural conflicts hidden beneath ordinary human history. Both contain ancient bloodlines, werewolves, powerful vampires, specialized weapons, and a leather clad warrior moving through a world shaped by centuries of revenge. Yet their tones are completely different. Underworld is colder, darker, and more serious. Its world is built around political conflict between supernatural species. The action resembles a modern urban war, with firearms, laboratories, underground headquarters, and carefully organized factions. Van Helsing is more openly adventurous. Its world is filled with castles, villages, carriages, religious artifacts, mechanical inventions, and creatures attacking beneath enormous moons. It does not want supernatural mythology to feel secret and realistic. It wants it to feel legendary. Anna Valerious and Celine also make an interesting comparison. Both women are highly trained fighters whose lives have been controlled by inherited conflict. They appear fearless because they have never been given the space to become anything else. Their identities are built around enemies, family history, and obligations older than their personal desires. But Celine receives more time to question the system she serves. Anna's rebellion is smaller because the story ends before she can imagine a full life beyond Dracula. She begins recognizing that her duty has consumed her, but she never receives the chance to rebuild herself. If the supernatural, politics, and darker creature mythology are what attracted you to Van Helsing, Underworld offers a more focused and mature variation. If you prefer colorful adventures, theatrical villains, and old fashioned gothic imagery, Van Helsing remains the more energetic experience. The third useful comparison is the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Like Van Helsing, it brings several famous literary figures into one shared action universe. Both films take characters created in different stories and treat them as though they have always existed within the same hidden history. This creates the same central challenge. Recognition is exciting, but recognition alone is not storytelling. The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen often introduces a famous name or ability before moving rapidly toward the next one. Van Helsing handles the crossover more effectively because its monsters are connected through a single practical conflict. Frankenstein's creature, Dracula's children, the werewolf curse, and Anna's mission all affect the same central plan. The connections may be excessive, but they are not completely arbitrary. Van Helsing also maintains a stronger visual identity. Its core landscapes, Gothic castles, dramatic skies, and mechanical weapons feel like pieces of one deliberately exaggerated world. The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen moves across more varied environments, but its different characters sometimes appear to have arrived from separate films. Where both movies fall short is emotional space. They are so busy establishing worlds, histories, and future possibilities that some characters feel like franchise pieces before they feel fully human. Both seem to expect additional films to complete ideas left unresolved. The difference is that Van Helsing's enthusiasm makes its incompleteness easier to forgive. The fourth comparison is Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992. These films use the same legendary vampire in almost opposite ways. Bram Stoker's Dracula approaches the story through desire, tragedy, obsession, religious imagery, and romantic horror. Its Dracula is frightening, but he is also shaped by loss and longing. The filmmaking uses shadows, practical illusions, theatrical sets, unusual transitions, and dreamlike imagery to make the story feel sensual and haunted. Van Helsing turns Dracula into a blockbuster villain. Richard Roxburgh's version still carries pain, particularly in his desire to bring his children to life. But the film gives that pain less psychological space. His grief becomes the engine for an enormous supernatural plan rather than the center of an intimate tragedy. The difference can be seen in how each film uses atmosphere. Bram Stoker's Dracula allows atmosphere to slow the story down. It wants you to feel temptation, fear, and uncertainty. Van Helsing uses atmosphere to accelerate the story. Storms, castles, music, and darkness are constantly preparing the next confrontation. Neither approach is automatically better. They simply serve different experiences. If you want Dracula as a complicated romantic and tragic figure, Bram Stoker's Dracula offers far more depth. If you want Dracula commanding flying offspring while battling a werewolf inside a collapsing castle, Van Helsing is the film that embraces that impossible spectacle. So, what does Van Helsing do that these other films do not? It combines the accessible adventure of the mummy, the supernatural conflict of underworld, the crossover ambition of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and the gothic imagery associated with Dracula, then pushes all of them into one breathless story. It falls short of those films in specific areas. It lacks the mummy's narrative control, Underworld's sustained mythology, and Bram Stoker's Dracula's emotional depth. But none of them creates precisely the same combination of monster history, heroic adventure, mechanical fantasy, and unapologetic excess. If you love Van Helsing, watch The Mummy next for stronger characters and similarly energetic direction. Try Underworld for darker vampire and werewolf mythology. Choose Bram Stoker's Dracula for a slower, more emotionally complex interpretation of the vampire legend. If Van Helsing exhausted you, the same film may reveal which part of its mixture did not work. Perhaps you wanted fewer creatures and a clearer adventure. Perhaps you wanted darker mythology. Perhaps you wanted Dracula treated with greater seriousness. Van Helsing attempts all three at once. That is why it can feel overcrowded. It is also why no comparison ever completely replaces it. Van Helsing arrived in May 2004, during a period when Hollywood was learning that familiar mythology could be rebuilt as enormous global entertainment. Fantasy was no longer being treated as a limited genre for a specialized audience. The Lord of the Rings trilogy had demonstrated how ancient worlds, monsters, and elaborate mythology could become mainstream cinematic events. The X-Men films were helping establish the modern superhero franchise, while Steven Sommers' own Mummy movies had already proved that a classic universal creature could be transformed into a fast, humorous adventure. Studios were searching for recognizable properties that could support sequels, merchandise, video games, and expanded worlds. Van Helsing appeared designed to answer that demand. Instead of reviving one monster, Universal placed several of its most famous horror figures inside the same film. Dracula, Frankenstein's creature, the Wolfman tradition, and Van Helsing himself were not obscure characters requiring years of explanation. The names already carried decades of cultural memory. The film's challenge was making those memories feel new. Its solution was to transform Gothic horror into blockbuster movement. This was also a moment when digital effects were encouraging filmmakers to attempt creatures and action that would previously have been impossible or extremely limited. A werewolf could transform without hiding behind shadows. Vampire brides could fly across a village. Dracula could become an enormous winged creature. Thousands of offspring could awaken simultaneously inside a castle. Van Helsing embraced those possibilities without much restraint. That excitement is visible throughout the film, but so are the limitations of the era. Digital artists could imagine almost anything, yet the technology did not always give those creations convincing weight. Contemporary critics repeatedly focused on the amount of computer generated spectacle. describing the film as noisy, overcrowded, or emotionally empty beneath its effects. The critical response was severe. Van Helsing received a Rotten Tomatoes critic score of only 24%, while Metacritic recorded a score of 35 out of 100. Those numbers suggest that the negative reaction was not limited to a handful of reviewers. Many critics agreed that the film's visual ambition had overwhelmed its characters and story. The most common complaints were understandable. The action rarely stopped. The mythology arrived too quickly. The creatures sometimes look less convincing when the film placed them under bright light or moved them at extreme speed. Critics who expected gothic tension found something closer to a theme park attraction, and that description was often meant as an insult. But it also identifies the film's intention more accurately than some reviews recognized. Van Helsing was trying to operate like a cinematic ride. It wanted every doorway to reveal another creature, every journey to become an attack, and every piece of mythology to connect with another one. The experience was designed around acceleration rather than contemplation. The real disagreement was whether that approach produced excitement or exhaustion. Critics tended to see exhaustion. Many ordinary moviegoers saw excitement. The film opened with more than $51 million in North America and eventually earned approximately $300 million worldwide. That was a significant gross, but the reported production budget was around $160 million before the full cost of global marketing and distribution. It was therefore neither a simple disaster nor the unquestionable franchise launching triumph Universal may have hoped to create. The opening demonstrated strong interest. The final result suggested that curiosity was not enough to turn Van Helsing into another mummy-sized series. This gap between recognition and long-term momentum is important. Audiences knew Hugh Jackman. They recognized Dracula, Frankenstein, and werewolves. The trailers promised enormous action, and the film arrived at the beginning of the summer blockbuster season. But recognition cannot replace emotional connection. The Mummy succeeded partly because people wanted to spend more time with Rick, Evelyn, Jonathan, and the rest of that group. Van Helsing built a fascinating world, yet its characters often received less room to become equally beloved. That may explain why the movie generated enthusiasm without creating the same kind of theatrical franchise. Its legacy became more complicated after leaving cinemas. On home video, television, and later streaming services, the qualities critics disliked became easier for new audiences to enjoy. The film no longer had to carry the expectation of becoming the next major Universal franchise. It could simply exist as a strange, ambitious monster adventure. That change in context helped it. When you discover Van Helsing casually, its excess can feel charming rather than disappointing. The early digital effects become part of its period identity. The dramatic costumes, rapid editing, enormous sets, and theatrical performances feel like evidence of a style Hollywood rarely attempts in exactly the same way today. The movie has gradually developed the reputation of a cult favorite. That does not mean everyone now considers it secretly perfect. The pacing problems remain. Some effects have aged. The undersoft mythology is still frustrating. What changed is their willingness to value personality over polish. Modern fans often celebrate the werewolf design, Alan Silvestri's score, the black and white opening, the masquerade sequence, Richard Roxburgh's theatrical Dracula, and the sheer confidence required to combine so many monsters in one story. The film's 20th anniversary inspired another wave of retrospective discussion. Writers who still acknowledge its flaws also described affection for its imagination and for the unusual freedom Stephen Sommers appeared to receive. That freedom has become more noticeable with time. Many modern franchise films are carefully designed to protect future installments, maintain consistent branding, and avoid creative decisions that might divide a large audience. Van Helsing certainly hoped to begin a franchise, but it does not feel cautious. It feels like someone spent an extraordinary amount of money building every monster idea that could fit through the door. That recklessness damaged the storytelling. It also preserved the film's individuality. The awards response reflected the same division between craft and overall reception. Van Helsing did not become a major award season film, and nobody expected it to compete for the most prestigious dramatic honors. Yet Alan Silvestri won the Saturn Award for Best Music. That recognition was deserved. The score does more than accompany the action, it defines the film's identity. Its percussion, choir, and large orchestral themes provide the energy that the editing sometimes struggles to create on its own. Even people who criticize the movie often remember the music. The film also received recognition in genre award categories connected to horror, costumes, makeup, and visual effects. That makes sense because its most successful achievements are technical and atmospheric. Gabriella Pescucci and Carlo Poggioli's costume work deserved greater attention. Van Helsing's silhouette is instantly recognizable. Anna's clothing makes her look prepared for movement while preserving the period fantasy style. Dracula and his brides appear theatrical without becoming visually disconnected from their surroundings. The production design was also overlooked in broader awards conversations. The castle interiors, laboratories, villages, Vatican headquarters, and masquerade hall do much of the world building the screenplay cannot pause to explain. Even when digital extensions show their age, the underlying visual imagination remains impressive. Was the film unfairly rejected in 2004? Not entirely. Critics correctly identified its weak character development, excessive pacing, tonal instability, and dependence on visual effects. Those problems were real then and remain visible now. But the reaction may have undervalued the sincerity of its ambition. When Helsing does not treat classic monsters with psychological depth, yet it does treat them with enthusiasm. It wants Dracula, Frankenstein's creature, and werewolves to feel enormous again. It wants to place you inside the excitement of seeing every famous nightmare collide. That quality has allowed it to survive. The film feels perfectly connected to the early 2000s through its editing, digital imagery, costume style, franchise ambition, and mixture of gothic fantasy with comic book action. It could not have been made in precisely the same way 10 years earlier. It also feels increasingly unusual now. The emotions beneath the story remain timeless. The desire to escape inherited duty, the fear of becoming what you fight, the pain of being judged by appearance, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for family. Its technique belongs to its era. Its monsters belong to cultural history, and its reputation now exists between those two worlds. No longer accepted simply as a failed blockbuster, but remembered as a flawed adventure, bold enough to create something audiences have never completely replaced. Because Van Helsing leaves several pieces of its mythology unresolved, fans have spent years trying to complete the story the film only hints at. The most widely discussed theory is that Gabriel Van Helsing is not simply named after the archangel Gabriel. He may actually be Gabriel. The film provides several clues. Dracula calls him Gabriel even though Van Helsing never introduced himself by that name. He recognizes the symbol on Van Helsing's ring and remembers him as the enemy who killed him centuries earlier. The ancient account describes Dracula's killer as the left hand of God, while Van Helsing casually remembers fighting the Romans at Masada, an event that occurred far beyond an ordinary human lifetime. These details have led many fans to interpret him as the Archangel Gabriel living in human form with his memories removed. This theory holds up better than almost any other interpretation. The film repeatedly connects Van Helsing to religious imagery, without explaining how an apparently human man could have lived across such an enormous period. His survival skills, instinctive understanding of evil, and unexplained history with Dracula all support the idea that he is something more than human. But look closer. The movie never clearly shows Van Helsing using divine power. He can be injured, cursed, and nearly killed. He depends on weapons, knowledge, and Carl's help. If he is Gabriel, he is not operating with the complete strength or awareness of an archangel. That leads to the second theory. Van Helsing may be an immortal divine being forced to live repeatedly as a human, losing his memories each time. Under this interpretation, Gabriel was sent to destroy Dracula in 1462. Something happened afterward that separated him from his original identity. He may have been punished for an unknown act, stripped of his memory to prevent him from becoming proud, or returned to earth whenever supernatural evil became powerful enough to require him. The Vatican might know more than it tells him. That possibility changes the entire headquarters sequence. Cardinal Jeanette does not treat Van Helsing like a normal employee. The order provides assignments and fragments of information but avoids giving him a complete account of his history. Perhaps the organization is protecting him from knowledge that would be dangerous, or perhaps it is controlling him. Fans often debate whether the church rescued Van Helsing after his memory loss or deliberately preserved that condition because an obedient hunter was more useful than an archangel who understood his true power. The film does not provide enough evidence to confirm this, but Van Helsing's frustration with his orders makes the theory emotionally believable. He is repeatedly told what to destroy before being told the full truth. Dracula offers to restore his memory during their final confrontation. That creates another theory. Dracula does not merely want Van Helsing distracted, he wants Gabriel to remember something capable of breaking his loyalty to heaven. Dracula speaks to him with the anger of someone who feels personally betrayed. Their history may therefore have involved more than one execution. Perhaps Gabriel knew Dracula before his fall. Perhaps he tried to save him. Perhaps Dracula believes the same divine system that condemned him also abandoned Gabriel. Some fans imagine that Dracula's offer contains a genuine truth. He may know why Gabriel lost his memory. He may even understand that Van Helsing's employers have hidden part of the story from him. But Dracula presents knowledge as temptation. Even when he tells the truth, he does so because he wants control. That is why Van Helsing refuses. Recovering his past would answer the question that has haunted him throughout the film, but accepting Dracula's offer would allow his enemy to define the meaning of that past. Van Helsing chooses his current moral judgment over the identity he may once have possessed. Another debate surrounds Anna's appearance in the clouds. The most direct interpretation is that her spirit has reached heaven with the rest of the Valerious family. Dracula's destruction fulfills the family promise, allowing their souls to leave purgatory. The expression on Anna's face confirms that she is finally free, but another interpretation treats the image as Van Helsing's grief. He has just killed the person he was trying to protect. Seeing her at peace may be the only way his mind can survive that guilt. The clouds become a private vision rather than objective proof of the afterlife. The film itself supports the spiritual explanation more strongly. Religious objects, souls, curses, holy water, and demonic bargains all function as real forces in this universe. Anna's family's salvation is not presented as a metaphor. It is one of the mission's stated supernatural consequences. Still, the emotional reading adds another layer. Whether Anna literally appears or Van Helsing imagines her, the vision gives him permission to continue. He cannot undo her death. He can only believe that completing the mission gave her something larger than the life they might have shared. Frankenstein's creature creates the final major theory. Some fans believe his escape was intended to begin another story in which he would become a protector rather than a hunted experiment. He possesses unusual intelligence, enormous strength, and knowledge of Dracula's machinery. More importantly, Van Helsing's decision to let him go completes the hunter's moral transformation. The creature sails away alone, but not defeated. He is finally beyond the control of his creator, Dracula, and the people who fear him. The open water represents a future not yet defined by anyone else. That theory does not require a sequel to work. His survival is already the conclusion of his arc. The being created as an object becomes free because someone finally recognizes him as a person. These theories remain compelling because the film gives us evidence without providing complete answers. The Archangel theory is almost certainly the intended direction. The ideas about repeated human lives, Vatican manipulation, and Dracula's hidden knowledge are more speculative. Anna's salvation is strongly supported by the story, while the exact future of Frankenstein's creature remains deliberately open. The unanswered questions can make the film feel incomplete, but they also keep its world alive. Long after the final image, you're still wondering what Gabriel forgot, what Dracula knew, and whether the greatest mystery in Van Helsing was never the identity of the monsters. It was the identity of the man hunting them. Beneath the monsters, weapons, and collapsing castles, Van Helsing is really about people struggling against identities they did not choose. Almost every important character has been given a role by someone else. Van Helsing is told that he is a hunter, Anna is told that she must complete her family's mission. Frankenstein's creature is told that he is an abomination. Bear becomes a werewolf and loses control of his own body. Dracula defines himself through immortality, power, and the bloodline he is determined to create. The story keeps returning to one question: are you defined by how you were made or by what you choose to do after that? Frankenstein's creature provides the clearest answer. He was assembled from death and awakened through unnatural science. Everything about his appearance encourages fear. His body looks damaged before he has lived long enough to make any moral choice. People assume he is dangerous because they cannot separate ugliness from evil. But the creature is compassionate. He understands suffering because suffering is the first thing the world teaches him. He does not want power. He does not want revenge against humanity. He wants freedom from people who see his body only as a weapon, an experiment, or a source of energy. Dracula looks far more human. He speaks elegantly. He wears beautiful clothing. He commands enormous spaces and surrounds himself with luxury, yet he treats living beings as objects. He uses Victor Frankenstein, manipulates Anna, sacrifices his brides, and tortures the creature because everyone around him exists only in relation to his desires. The visual monster has humanity. The beautiful man has abandoned it. That reversal is not accidental. The film asks you to look beyond appearance, reputation, and origin. Monstrosity is not a shape, it is the decision to deny another person's humanity. This idea also explains Van Helsing's moral conflict. His work requires him to make immediate judgments. A creature attacks, and he must respond before innocent people are harmed. But the longer he performs that role, the more he questions whether every target deserves the same fate. He is famous for killing monsters, yet the story becomes meaningful when he chooses not to kill one. Protecting Frankenstein's creature represents a break from the identity built for him. Van Helsing stops functioning only as the weapon of an institution and begins making decisions according to his own conscience. That choice becomes even more powerful after he transforms into a werewolf. For most of the film, the boundary between hunter and hunted appears clear. Van Helsing carries weapons. The creatures flee from or attack him. He represents control while they represent instinct. The curse destroys that separation. His body changes without permission. His intelligence becomes trapped beneath violent impulse. He experiences what it means to be feared for something he cannot fully control. This detail will hit differently now. Van Helsing does not defeat Dracula despite becoming a monster. He defeats Dracula because he becomes one. The identity he would normally consider a curse becomes the only source of power capable of completing the mission. The film therefore refuses to treat transformation as entirely simple. The werewolf is dangerous, but danger and evil are not automatically the same thing. Power depends on the choices surrounding it. Dracula's immortality could have given him centuries to develop wisdom or compassion. Instead, it allows his selfishness to grow without limits. Frankenstein's creature possesses strength capable of destroying ordinary people, yet he repeatedly chooses restraint. Van Helsing's curse gives him the ability to save countless lives, but it also causes the death of the person he loves. That tragedy reveals another deeper theme. Good intentions do not protect people from consequences. Anna and Van Helsing are both trying to do what is right. Neither one desires power or personal glory. They risk themselves for others throughout the story. Yet their mission still ends in loss. This prevents the film from presenting heroism as a clean transaction. You do not always sacrifice something and receive an equal reward. Sometimes you save the world and return from the battle carrying grief no one else can see. Anna's entire life demonstrates that reality. She inherits a promise she never made. Generations of her family failed to defeat Dracula, but she must carry the consequences. Her ancestors cannot find peace, her brother is lost, and her home remains trapped under fear. Duty has consumed her identity. She knows who she must fight, but the film gives her very little opportunity to discover who she is outside the fight. Her connection with Van Helsing matters because he sees the person beneath the mission. He wants her to survive, not merely succeed. That is almost a revolutionary idea for someone raised to believe that her death is acceptable as long as the family obligation is completed. Van Helsing faces the same problem from another direction. He has no memory of the person he once was, so duty fills the empty space. The Vatican gives him assignments, weapons, and purpose. Without a past, he can avoid asking what future he wants. Anna and Van Helsing therefore recognize the same emotional prison in one another. She remembers too much family history. He remembers none of his own. She is controlled by an inherited identity. He is controlled by the absence of identity. Both characters use responsibility to avoid confronting how alone they feel. Dracula represents the darkest version of refusing to let go of identity and legacy. His desire to bring his children to life may initially resemble parental love, but love requires recognizing that another life has value beyond your own needs. Dracula cannot do that. His children are not individuals to him, they are proof of his continuation. They represent a bloodline, an army, and a victory over natural limits. He refuses to accept death because death would mean surrendering control. The cocoons hanging throughout his castle become symbols of that obsession. They are potential lives suspended between existence and emptiness. Dracula surrounds himself with the appearance of a future, but nothing can truly live because his version of creation is based on possession. Frankenstein's creature is the missing element because he contains genuine life. That life cannot be manufactured through machinery alone. It comes with consciousness, fear, memory, and moral choice. Dracula wants the energy inside him without respecting the person carrying it. The castle therefore becomes more than a villain's headquarters. It is a monument to the inability to release the past. Dracula preserves old grudges, ancient ambitions, dead offspring, and unfinished battles. Van Helsing enters that space carrying no memories at all. One man is trapped by too much history, the other is trapped by the absence of it. Neither can move forward until their conflict ends. Even Anna's family is held between worlds because of an incomplete promise. Their souls cannot rest while Dracula survives. The story repeatedly connects peace with completion, but completion always demands sacrifice. Anna completes the mission and loses her life. Van Helsing completes the hunt and loses Anna. Frankenstein's creature survives only by leaving every connection behind. This is why the ending feels sad even though evil has been defeated. Victory does not restore what the characters lost. It only creates the possibility that the suffering will not continue into another generation. And perhaps that is the most human idea inside Van Helsing. You may not be able to repair the past. You may never receive every answer. You may carry responsibilities that were placed upon you unfairly. But you can decide what happens next. Van Helsing chooses mercy, Anna chooses courage. Frankenstein's creature chooses freedom. Their choices do not erase their pain, but they prevent Dracula's world of possession, repetition, and inherited suffering from continuing unchanged. The monsters are memorable. The deeper story is about refusing to let someone else decide what kind of person you must become. Van Helsing did not change cinema through critical acclaim or a long series of sequels. Its influence is quieter, more complicated, and easier to recognize in retrospect. The movie arrived before the phrase shared cinematic universe became one of Hollywood's favorite promises. It did not invent the monster crossover. Universal had already placed famous creatures together in earlier films, and stories such as The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen had combined literary icons in other forms. What Van Helsing did was rebuild that crossover idea at the scale of a 21st century blockbuster. Dracula, Frankenstein's creature, werewolves, Mr. Hyde, vampire brides, secret organizations, and ancient religious mythology all exist within one continuous adventure. They are not brief appearances included only for recognition. Their curses, abilities, and histories operate as parts of the same plot. That structure anticipated direction studios would pursue repeatedly in later years. Instead of producing one self contained adaptation, filmmakers could establish a world where familiar characters crossed between stories and supported future installments. Van Helsing clearly left doors open for that kind of expansion, particularly through Gabriel's unexplained identity, the secret Vatican organization, and Frankenstein's creature surviving the ending. But the expansion never happened. No theatrical sequel followed, although the character continued in a single issue comic released around the film's premiere, where Van Helsing encountered another famous literary creation, Dr. Moreau. The comic shows that the concept had room to move beyond Dracula and continue introducing other figures from classic horror and adventure fiction. The absence of a sequel became part of the film's legacy. Van Helsing now feels like the remains of a larger universe that audiences were only allowed to visit once. The secret headquarters in Rome suggests hundreds of missions. Gabriel's lost memory suggests centuries of hidden history. Carl's inventions suggest an entire network supporting supernatural hunters around the world. The movie creates all that possibility, then disappears. That incompleteness can be frustrating, but it also gives the film a strange imaginative power. Because no sequel provided fixed answers. Gabriel's true nature, his history with Dracula, and the future of Frankenstein's creature remain open to interpretation. The film lives partly through what it never became. Its most visible legacy may be the way it reimagined the werewolf. Werewolves had appeared in many forms before 2004, but Van Helsing's version remains especially popular among monster fans because it combines human proportions with enormous animal power. The creature stands upright without looking like a person wearing a wolf costume. Its shoulders, arms, claws, and movement make it feel capable of challenging Dracula physically. The transformation is equally memorable. The human body does not simply grow fur. Its outer layer tears away, revealing the creature beneath it. The effect turns transformation into a violent conflict between identities. Even as digital technology has improved, this design continues to be discussed because the idea is so clear and visually expressive. The film also helped preserve a particular style of blockbuster that has become less common. Van Helsing is based on recognizable characters, but its visual identity does not feel carefully neutral. It contains an extended black and white prologue, exaggerated European accents, huge mechanical weapons, dramatic costume silhouettes, theatrical performances, and an orchestral score that never tries to hide its emotions. It is the work of a filmmaker being allowed to push a personal fascination far beyond restraint. A 20th anniversary retrospective captured that contradiction. Well, the film remains chaotic, excessive, and critically unsuccessful. Yet its elaborate sets and almost innocent enthusiasm can make those same flaws strangely endearing. That description explains why its reputation has grown. Van Helsing has not been completely transformed into a misunderstood masterpiece. Its weaknesses are too visible for that. The emotional relationships remain rushed. The action occasionally loses clarity. Several effects show their age, and the story leaves important questions unanswered. What has changed is the context surrounding those weaknesses. In 2004, audiences were encouraged to see the film as the beginning of a major new blockbuster property. Compared with The Mummy, it appeared less controlled and less emotionally satisfying. Years later, it can be experienced without that pressure. Now it feels like an artifact from a period when studios sometimes placed enormous resources behind singularly strange ideas. Its messiness is no longer only evidence of failure, it is evidence of risk. The film's reputation has also benefited from the careers of its cast. Hugh Jackman became even more closely associated with Wolverine, making Gabriel Van Helsing feel like a rare alternate version of his action hero presence. Kate Beckinsale's connection to supernatural cinema continued through the Underworld series. Richard Roxburgh's Dracula remained so exaggerated that the performance became instantly recognizable rather than disappearing among more restrained interpretations. Alan Silvestri's music may have aged better than almost anything else. The themes still communicate movement, darkness, heroism, and adventure without needing the images. The score gives Van Helsing the emotional scale of a legend even when the screenplay is moving too quickly to earn that feeling on its own. Did the film directly reshape the movies that followed? That would be difficult to prove. Its clearest importance is not that later productions copied it, but that it demonstrated both the attraction and danger of building a connected world before establishing a strong emotional center. Familiar characters can create instant excitement. Connections can make a universe feel enormous, but without enough time for relationships, recognition becomes a substitute for depth. Van Helsing offers that warning years before shared universe planning became common across blockbuster filmmaking, and yet its failure to launch a franchise may have preserved what people now love about it. There are no increasingly complicated sequels changing its rules. There is no final installment explaining every mystery. There is only one excessive adventure, moving from black and white horror to gothic fantasy and ending with its hero still searching for his past. That is its place in film history. Not the monster epic that successfully created a new universal empire, but the ambitious experiment that tried to place an entire legacy inside one box. It reached too far. It moved too fast. But more than 2 decades later, people still remember the coat, the crossbow, the masquerade, the werewolf, the music, the castle, and the monster hunter who may have been something far greater than a man. A forgettable film does not leave images like those behind. Alright, full spoilers from this point. If you haven't seen the film yet, close this now. Go watch it and come back when you're ready. Trust me, you'll want to experience it fresh. The ending of Van Helsing only makes complete sense when you realize that the film has been building two mysteries at the same time. The first is practical. Why can Dracula create thousands of children but not bring them fully to life? The second is personal. Why does Dracula recognize Van Helsing? And why does Van Helsing remember events no ordinary man could have witnessed? The practical mystery is answered through Frankenstein's creature. Dracula is undead. His brides are undead. Their offspring therefore enter the world without the natural spark that sustains living beings. The children can be formed, stored, and temporarily activated, but they cannot remain alive. Victor Frankenstein discovered a way to create genuine life from dead material. His creature is not simply a body moving through electrical power. He possesses independent consciousness, memory, compassion, and fear. That is what Dracula needs. He does not require Victor's equipment alone. He needs the living energy contained within the creature. This is foreshadowed from the opening sequence. Dracula does not mourn Victor because a brilliant scientist has died. He reacts because the person who understood the process is gone, while the successful result has escaped. The burning windmill therefore creates a false ending. The villagers believe they have destroyed an abomination. Dracula believes he may have lost the key to his future. But Frankenstein's creature survives beneath the ruins, carrying both the scientific miracle and the moral center of the story. When he reappears, his importance becomes clearer. He understands that Dracula wants to drain the life from him and transfer it into the offspring. That process may leave him dead, but his greatest fear is not merely personal. If Dracula succeeds, an entire army of vampires will awaken. The creature is willing to hide forever to prevent that. That choice immediately separates him from Dracula. Both characters exist beyond natural human life. Both are feared by ordinary people. Both have enormous physical power. But the creature treats life as something precious because he was given only one chance to possess it. Dracula treats life as property because he believes immortality gives him the right to control it. The carriage sequence hides one of the film's smartest twists. Van Helsing understands that Dracula's brides will attack anything they believe contains the creature. He therefore uses a decoy carriage, allowing the attackers to commit themselves before revealing the trap. For a moment, the explosion appears to solve the problem, but Dracula's forces are more observant than expected, and the creature is eventually captured. This reversal matters because it prevents Van Helsing from winning through preparation alone. He cannot simply outsmart Dracula from a distance. He must enter the vampire's hidden world and confront the mystery connecting them. The portal to Dracula's castle also resolves an important question. Why has nobody found this enormous fortress despite centuries of hunting? The answer is that it does not exist in ordinary physical space. The castle is separated from the world and can only be reached through a doorway activated by the fragment protected by Anna's family. That fragment is not just a convenient object, it represents the burden the Valerious family has carried across generations. Their ancestors swore to destroy Dracula, and the family has preserved one of the only objects capable of reaching him. Anna therefore carries both the responsibility and the means of ending it. Carl discovers that the doorway's design contains two knights riding toward a castle. When the missing piece is inserted, the image becomes complete and the portal opens. The symbolism is simple but effective. Van Helsing and Anna are the two figures completing the journey their predecessors could not finish. Inside the castle, Dracula finally activates his children using Frankenstein's creature. The cocoons begin opening, and the skies fill with newly awakened vampires. This is Dracula's moment of apparent victory. But the process also reveals the weakness of his entire plan. Every child is connected to him. When Dracula dies, they die with him. His dream of a bloodline is not actually about creating independent life. It is about multiplying himself. That is why the offspring collapse instantly when he is destroyed. They never possessed identities separate from their father. They were extensions of his will. The werewolf cure creates the final countdown. Van Helsing has been bitten, and the curse will fully claim him at midnight. Carl learns that Dracula keeps a cure because werewolves are the only creatures physically capable of killing him. This may seem strange at first. Why would Dracula preserve a cure for his most important weakness? The answer is control. Dracula uses werewolves as servants and hunters. Keeping the cure allows him to reverse the transformation when useful or remove the threat if one of his creatures turns against him. His arrogance makes him believe the cure will always remain under his control. That arrogance eventually destroys him. Van Helsing does not defeat Dracula through a weapon provided by the Vatican. He defeats him through a curse Dracula helped spread. This creates a powerful reversal. Throughout the film, Van Helsing relies on knowledge, machinery, and discipline. In the final battle, none of those things is enough. He must surrender control and become the very kind of creature he has spent his life hunting. Dracula transforms into a giant winged form, revealing the animal hidden beneath his elegant human appearance. Van Helsing transforms into a werewolf, revealing dangerous power beneath the disciplined hunter. Their final forms expose what each man has been hiding. Dracula's sophistication was always a mask for hunger and domination. Van Helsing's control was always covering a more mysterious, possibly supernatural identity. During the confrontation, Dracula calls him Gabriel and refers to a history Van Helsing cannot remember. He identifies him as the figure who killed him centuries earlier. The film strongly implies that Gabriel Van Helsing may be the Archangel Gabriel or a divine servant who has existed across different periods of history. Earlier clues support this. Van Helsing remembers fighting at Masada, despite that event occurring many centuries before the film. His ring bears a symbol Dracula recognizes. The Vatican knows more about him than it reveals, and his unusual first name is clearly not accidental. Dracula offers to restore his memories. This is one of the most important choices in the film. Van Helsing desperately wants to know who he is. Yet he refuses to receive that knowledge from Dracula. He understands that truth offered by someone seeking control can become another form of manipulation. He chooses the person he has become over the person he might once have been. Then the werewolf overpowers Dracula and bites through his throat. The death is not only physical. Dracula spent centuries trying to defeat natural limits. He resisted death, created offspring, built a castle beyond ordinary space, and surrounded himself with servants who treated him as untouchable. He is ultimately killed by uncontrolled nature. The werewolf is everything Dracula believes he can dominate: instinct, transformation, mortality, and physical hunger. The curse becomes a force he cannot persuade or command. Once Dracula dies, his offspring collapse, and the centuries-long threat ends within seconds. But the emotional climax happens after the victory. Anna reaches Van Helsing with the cure. He is still in werewolf form and no longer fully recognizes her. She approaches because she believes the human part of him remains present. For one brief moment, the creature hesitates, suggesting that Van Helsing is fighting the curse from inside. Then instinct wins. He attacks Anna before she can escape. She manages to inject him with the cure, saving his humanity. But the transformation reverses too late. Van Helsing returns to himself while holding her body. This is the cruelest twist in the film. The person he was ordered to protect dies because of the power he needed to complete the mission. Without the werewolf, Dracula survives. Without Anna, Van Helsing remains a monster. Each saves the other, but only one survives. Anna's death also completes the Valerious family promise. Dracula is gone, so her ancestors can finally enter heaven. The mission succeeds at the exact moment the last member of the family dies. That is why the ending is both victorious and tragic. The family is freed, but the bloodline ends. The final funeral scene gives Anna the peace she never experienced while alive. As her body burns, Van Helsing sees her face in the clouds alongside her family. Within the supernatural rules of the film, this is best understood as a genuine vision rather than a simple hallucination. Souls, curses, holy objects, and divine forces are already real in this world. Anna is showing him that her sacrifice was not meaningless. But the vision does not erase his guilt. Van Helsing still knows that his hands caused her death. He saved the world and completed her mission, yet he must continue living with the final moment between them. My reaction to the ending has always been divided. Part of me wishes Anna had survived because the relationship between her and Van Helsing had only begun to reveal its emotional potential. A sequel could have explored two people learning how to live after spending their entire lives defined by duty. But her death gives the film a sadness that makes it more memorable. A completely happy ending would have matched the adventure, but it would not have matched the deeper story about sacrifice and inherited suffering. Frankenstein's creature receives the future Anna is denied. He escapes across the water, finally free from Dracula and from the people who would destroy him out of fear. Van Helsing watches him live and chooses not to interfere. That moment completes Van Helsing's moral arc. At the beginning, he is a hunter sent to eliminate creatures. At the end, he understands that the word monster cannot tell him who deserves death. There is no post-credit scene. The absence feels especially noticeable because so much remains unresolved. Gabriel's true identity, the Vatican's knowledge, Dracula's history with him, and Frankenstein's future were all potential foundations for another film. But the story we have closes around one central truth. Van Helsing defeats Dracula only after becoming a monster, while Frankenstein's creature survives because he proves himself human. The hunter and the hunted exchange places, and that reversal is the hidden key to the entire ending. After opening every layer of Van Helsing, my final rating is 5.2 out of 10. That score reflects a film I can enjoy while still recognizing how far it falls short of its own potential. Van Helsing is imaginative, energetic, atmospheric, and completely committed to its oversized Gothic world. The production design remains striking. Alan Silvestri's score gives the adventure tremendous momentum. Hugh Jackman brings restraint and humanity to a character who could easily have become one-dimensional, while Kate Beckinsale makes Anna's courage feel inseparable from the grief she carries. Richard Roxburgh delivers a Dracula performance that is theatrical enough to match the film surrounding him. And Shola Hensley gives Frankenstein's creature the emotional dignity needed to make the story's central moral question work. The film's greatest strength is that it has an identity. You can recognize Van Helsing from a single image, a musical phrase, a weapon, a costume, or a transformation. It does not feel like a generic monster movie created by people embarrassed by the material. It loves these creatures and wants them to feel enormous, but ambition is not the same as control. The story moves too quickly through its strongest ideas. Anna's grief, her relationship with Van Helsing, the creature's humanity, Gabriel's lost identity, and Dracula's history with him all deserved more time. The action frequently interrupts the emotion, and some digital effects weaken the physical danger by making movement feel too weightless. The film gives you enough mythology to imagine a richer epic, then rushes past much of it to reach the next explosion, transformation, or chase. That makes Van Helsing entertaining without making it fully satisfying. You should watch it if you love gothic fantasy, supernatural action, dramatic villains, werewolves, vampires, secret organizations, mechanical weapons, and early 2000s blockbusters that were willing to be strange. It is especially enjoyable when approached as a dark adventure rather than a faithful adaptation of classic horror literature. You may struggle with it if you prefer slow suspense, subtle performances, realistic action, carefully developed romance, or mythology that answers every question it introduces. This is not a film I would call essential cinema, and its visual scale is no longer enough to demand a theatrical experience. Streaming is the best place to watch it today, especially on a large screen with strong sound, so Silvestri's score and the production design can still create the atmosphere they deserve. For devoted fans of gothic action, owning a copy also makes sense. Van Helsing is the kind of flawed comfort movie people return to not because every part works, but because no other film offers precisely the same combination. Its monsters are larger than life, its story is overloaded, its heart is more sincere than its reputation suggests, and even when the machinery shakes, the effects age, and the narrative loses control, the box remains filled with ideas worth opening. Every film is a box, and we opened this one together. Thank you for joining me inside the darkness, the castles, and the unanswered history of Van Helsing. This is why revisiting flawed films can be so rewarding. A movie does not need to be perfect to contain unforgettable images, meaningful ideas, or a world you still want to explore years later. Tell me in the comments, should Anna have survived, or did her sacrifice give the ending the emotional weight it needed? And what do you believe Gabriel Van Helsing truly was, a human hunter, an immortal servant of heaven, or the Archangel Gabriel himself? Share your interpretation, because this is one of those films where the questions left unanswered may be more interesting than any official explanation. Like the video if you enjoyed opening this movie with me. Subscribe to the Film Box for more deep breakdowns, hidden details, ending explanations, and honest reviews. And turn on notifications so you do not miss the next story we unpack. Another film is already waiting, another world is ready to be opened. Every film is a box, and we've only just started opening them. That's the Film Box. See you in the next one.